Hey everyone, today we're going to be looking at some culvert pipes along this abandoned railroad. This is part of the Boston and Maine Railroad. A train has not been here on this line since 1925. The tracks were torn up shortly after. They left all the ties. Most of them have since rotted away. Years ago, there was either a small bridge or a culvert pipe here that has either washed out or was removed. There's a swamp over here. Occasionally the water gets high and will flow across the tracks in this location. But there are some culvert pipes along this that are in pretty good condition for going 95 years without maintenance. We still have this drainage ditch that the train company has built, held up by rock walls on each side. And here we have a little bit of railroad remnants. That is a tie. Some of the ties are very noticeable because they use so many preservatives such as creosote to keep them around. Occasionally the drainage ditch will have an opening so that it can feed into the river. Along this drainage ditch, every few hundred feet there is a small culvert, cast iron, going under the tracks to drain into the ditch. And as you can see, the track is starting to get more grown in. This just gets worse and worse until it's not even noticeable except for the ground being flat. And occasionally, because we're built up on the hill, you'll see this. The ground is no longer flat because at some point in time there was a mudslide. You can even see the trickling water here. This trickling water is constant. I can tell by the plants. It has turned into a marsh. That's because in this area they never put in a culvert pipe to handle it. And the landscape is constantly changing. Just up here we have a culvert pipe which is still working actually. There we have some trickling water that's going right underneath here. That looks like a bridge hikers have built from logs. There's actually quite a bit of water going to that one. Here we have a ton of water coming down the hill to this culvert pipe. And it's still looking pretty good after all these years. There we go. I got that clog out of there fast. Now this culvert can go on a few more decades. Let's go check out the other side. Getting down the other side is kind of tricky. A lot of ice-covered rocks leading down to a freezing river. There we go. It's coming out right there. You see that damage to the bottom of the pipe? That was done by road salt. because there's a street a few hundred feet above us that they salt the crap out of, and it just ruins the pipes. Look at that, we have a little ice jam starting in the river. It's pretty warm out, so we have a bunch of icebergs floating by, and occasionally they collect like this. But it's going to be 60 degrees for a few days. All of this snow and ice will be gone. We have another ice jam forming right here. Over here is a pretty deep area. Where I'm standing right here, we have about 4 inches of solid ice that I'm standing on right now. And over here, look where the water's coming out. That hole in the middle of the ice. There's an upcurrent. As you can see, that rock right there is working like a ramp. So the water is getting lifted up and it dug away the ice. Another one right there. Imagine how much work it took to build this railway. They had to cut this entire flat area. They dug all that out to build this along the river, a shelf. This tree here fell down very recently. I remember when it still had its needles. There was a lot of insects in it though. You could see all the woodpecker holes. Right here we have a pipe that I think the trains used to get water out of the river, because it's right here alongside the tracks, and there's a few more pipes up ahead. Years ago, this was a culvert here. See, the rail ties are still there, and down there there's a few pieces of timber where water used to pass under before, over the years, the drainage ditches completely filled in and are now unrecognizable unless you know what to look for. There's those pipes I was talking about. The track now is completely grown in, but you can still see the flat raised area where it was. They built the flat raised area so that it could pass through this marshland. Years ago, there was a culvert pipe right here that has since washed out. And you can tell it's washed out during heavy rain because this lip right here, that's a small sandbar that has been created. It's buried in snow, but there's a concrete culvert entrance here laying on its side, and the pipe just washed away because this is usually water in the summertime. A bunch of rusty mud caused by runoff across the railway area. Another sign of the railroad. This used to be a telegraph pole. Now it's preserved. They used to soak it in this creosote, but you see it only sunk into the wood about a ½ inch, so the inside was able to rot because it wasn't protected. Today the river is about 2.5 feet, 2.4 feet exact. Sometimes at the highest it can get up to 16 feet at flood stage, and that's when all this would go underwater, and that's how a lot of these logs got stuck here. Okay, the railroad used to be on this raised area, but this way the raised area is completely gone. The track was not here, so all this here washed away. And you can see down here, some of the rocks, they're squared off, and you can see the holes where they drilled and blasted. They put a bunch of rock here to stop erosion, but at one point the river must have gone up here, or water came down here, washing it out. Because the river wasn't down here. It was up here on the flat area. This is drainage from that pond. This is going to be the biggest culvert along our adventure today. And it's still in great shape, because when you build something out of granite, it lasts forever. And this one is still really working. This drainage ditch is picking up a lot along the railroad. And this one here goes up to the road under another culvert pipe. not really much of a culvert, but considering how old it is, there's absolutely no damage to the concrete there. Concrete back then was just built better. A lot of times it doesn't even fall apart. Just look at that. You can see they patched it a while back. That patch there looks brand new, but it hasn't been maintained in such a long time. Up on top of it, the trees growing all over it. And if we walk out here, we have a really old car I can show. There's a few of them. One of the cars out here is so old that it has wooden spokes. The one with the wooden spokes I'll show next. That one's a few hundred feet up. First car is here. This one's difficult to get to in the summer. Very grown in and marshy. The engine's gone. Somebody shot a bunch of holes in it. So years ago when that track was still open, somebody towed it out here and left it. Not much left. As soon as I'm done walking the railroad, after about 3 miles, I'm going to walk back along the roadway so I can show all the culverts that this is coming from. These trails here, most of the time, they're just used by animals. People use them, but only to a certain extent. As you can see, there's still a trail now, but there's no longer anybody else's footprints here. Not really. It's mostly moose that use this. Here we have pieces of a car, and there we have the actual car. Once again, covered in bullet holes. You can see the gas tank there. This car is up on its roof. Here's the front of it. You can see the wooden spokes. I don't know what kind of car this is, but as you can see, look at the brakes. You can see there's cables going to the brakes. They're mechanical brakes, they're not hydraulic like in the newer cars. See it? 2 brake pads there. And when you stepped on the brake, these would come apart and squeeze against the inside of the wheel. There's an old wheelbarrow. An old rusty roll of telegraph line. And I'm finally to that area I was talking about. There's no longer any human footprints. Just tons of moose in this area of the tracks. There's a piece of the pole. That's the top of it. Wooden pegs. They would have had the glass insulators on top. Somebody probably took the insulators because those older ones that are blue glass are worth money. I found some out here before, but they're always broken. The good ones have been picked off long before. Occasionally when I come out here in these woods, you do run into a moose, but it's pretty rare. They're usually active at night. Here we have another culvert pipe, which is still operational. Right here, occasionally I see water. It has to come up out of that hole, but it is still working. Here we are on the other side. This tree grew around it, but it's completely unclogged. Well, this pond is already melting pretty fast. The past week it's been below freezing constantly, but today we're up in the upper 50s now. Just for a few days we're going to lose all our snow, but it'll be back next week. There is a culvert pipe here that's been jammed up as long as I can remember. That's why that pond is there. This land is holding it back. Where I'm walking now is pretty muddy because it didn't freeze this deep. So you can see the culvert pipe is right here. We got a little bit of water trickling out of it. Let's get back up. Look at the other side. There's a massive beaver blockage. Right here. This area is really grown in. This is a beaver dam. It's been blocked for so long that there's trees growing on top of it, but it's still trickling a little. I've never been down here when this has been flooding over. I don't think that even happens. Now, as I walk down here, this is where the beavers actually live. This is their lodge, and they're always adding to this. It's bigger than it looks. A lot of it's covered with snow. That pond's not really safe to walk on this time of year, but that's where the stream enters, goes up there, and there's a roadway just up on top of that hill with another culvert we can look at later on. This is called a witch's broom. That's when a tree grows a big cluster like that. The branches are so close together that it just kills itself because the sunlight can't get to it all. Now the track is starting to open up again because this area is semi-maintained. This is about 2 miles since I started. Here we are to another pipe. This culvert pipe here has had a lot of issues. See the water coming down here? Originally, there would have been some kind of collection there where it would have went in, but now the water is just eroding. That's why these holes are here. The ground is now sinking. There's a lot of water there. See it? It's a failing culvert pipe. It's covered in holes. So it's not going in the beginning. It's like entering through the middle of it, and it's not pouring out the end either. It's pouring out like a few feet back because the pipe is failing. Let's get a better look at that one. Going down a slippery hill. See the end of that thing? Just completely rotted out. Just a few feet past that, see all this mud, water trickling across the railroad? It's now a bunch of marsh because over the years, mud slowly coming down here has filled in the drainage ditch. So now it's just slowly going across it. That's why it's no longer completely flat. It's a small angle. The water used to go into a ditch to the culvert, then across. It's no longer working correctly. Here's a pretty big ice dam that's holding back about a foot of water, except on the other side where it's all able to get by. As the water gets warmer, that'll eventually break. Got some beaver damage right there. Okay, we have another nice granite culvert running right here. Let's go check it out. Walking down an icy hill, always step sideways. Okay, this one's really nice. We can walk through that. It's just like a door. Always step sideways to catch yourself. Now this is nice. You feel the nice cold air because the ground is freezing. Let's get some lights. It's really nice, that nice green moss. That moss, it only takes like a day for that stuff to green up. In the winter it goes into hibernation, then it comes right back. You see this? We've dealt with this before. This is called an ice dam. Ice doesn't build all the way through these. It usually builds at the end, and it can get pretty deep, backing up the water in these. See, I just step on this and I fall in a few inches. These are my favorite ones. Now this culvert was made back in the 1880s, I think. Maybe a little before. That concrete looks brand new. The concrete they used back then was just great. Look at these holes. You see how they plug the top with rocks to keep the soil from coming in? And there's a lot of spider nests up there too. These older ones like this were built to last forever. This thing still looks like it did the day it was put in. Now this one is exactly 6 feet tall. You see what I'm standing on now? It's icy at this end again because the cold weather made this freeze. Today it's just melting. I still gotta figure out how deep this is. Not too bad. Right there's a hole because the water coming in. Unlike concrete, granite will take thousands of years to erode. If this was a concrete culvert, you'd be seeing rebar sticking out of that everywhere. Today we're supposed to have some torrential rains. So all the snow is going to be gone. Look at this big tree that fell right down. Let's get back up to the tracks so we can keep going on our adventure. Still got a few more miles. No, just another mile, I think. You see where I'm standing? There's a dip. I think there used to be a pipe there. And possibly here. There used to be one. The drainage ditch is still running. After about a 3-mile hike, we come to the river. This is as far as we can walk. The train used to go across a trestle here. That's what this part is. The trestle has since been removed for scrap. On the other side, the reason we can't walk any further is because it's now developed into a neighborhood. And there's not really anything left. Now this here is just somebody's driveway who crosses it. These tracks here are still owned by the train company. And that's quite the workout, walking in heavy wet snow, because you have to march through it. We probably have 8 inches left. We had 14 inches a week ago. It's melting fast. Here we are, the first culvert along the road, right down here. The good thing about this area is they're all marked with posts, so they're easy to find. This one here goes across this driveway. The one here goes up to a storm drain. This area is designed perfectly so it doesn't flood. It doesn't have curbs. So all the water just flows off the road down here and collects. The other side of the road goes down into this pipe so that you never have floods. Now, why are there storm drains? Because in the winter, you have a snow bank blocking it. So it goes into the storm drains instead. Let's see what we got. Okay, this one has an ice dam in the end. That's what this ice buildup is. Because when it's really cold, it freezes the end while it's still warm on the inside. But usually the entire system, the water feeding it, freezes up. Now this, I think, is just for groundwater behind the wall. Let's get a look in there. All the way through. Looks perfect. Let's go see the other side. Here we are on the other side. The drains. Most of the water just goes off into that ditch and through the culvert down to the river. So this here is draining a marsh. That pipe there is probably 36 inches, it looks. It might only be 2. You see right here how the road is tilting? All the water is flowing down into that gully where we have a culvert we're gonna check out. There's a good amount of water flowing down there beneath the ice. Here's our culvert. Looks like this one will be pretty big. Definitely big enough to walk through. Yeah, that is definitely big enough to walk through. A lot of water here under the ice. This whole stream is thawing. That looks like a 4-foot pipe to me. Let's go in there. Those pieces of ice going through would make a pretty loud noise. Let's go. Water's going pretty fast in here. Look, we got some spiders. I have to keep my legs apart because the water's going so fast, it'll just jump right into your shoes. Those are called northern black widows. They're not as poisonous as the ones you get in the south, but they feel like a bee sting. You might not be able to get out of here. See that thing at the end? That is an ice dam. These form up north when it's cold. But as you can see, the warm weather has eroded right through the bottom of it. You see the water pressure, how it just makes that jump? It'll do the same thing in your shoes. I just kicked that to slow it down. Here we go. I'm going to kick my way out. Boom. It's getting kind of thick now, so I'm just going to crawl out. Whoa! That was awesome. This is all ice here. The waterfall coming out of it froze. See what we got here? All this ice building up just on the ends. If I would have tried doing this culvert a few days ago, behind this would have been built up with about a foot or two of water. Okay, this one's probably smaller, just by looking at the area. I'm sure the pipe's not as big as the last one. Probably a 2-foot pipe. No, it's not even a 2-foot pipe, just a 1-foot pipe. No ice dam here because this one probably doesn't run unless something's melting. That last one I went in actually handles a stream full time. This one here is the one that feeds that beaver pond. You can tell by the marsh, this one constantly runs. It's made out of concrete, but it's only 12 or 18 inches. This is like part 2 of what feeds the beaver pond. I can actually see the pond down there at the bottom of that hill. Here's another pipe. See all the tons of moose tracks? The moose love coming here because there's this mud pool. These mud pools always attract them. Okay, here we have a pretty big stream going under the road. This is the one that I showed was going under the really big train culvert, the one that's more like a granite bridge. You see, we did have an ice dam here, but the flowing water has melted it. And you can't see through the other side. I'm not going to walk into this one because the other side, there's bars on it to keep the beavers out. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Here on the other side of the road, we have this small dam where you can put in pieces of wood to raise the water level. You see over here, we have this big screen to stop the beavers from building up inside of this. But just in case they dam up the screen, the water can overflow out of here into this ditch here. And then it can go down multiple different storm drains. And if it clogs up all those, it can go down there into another culvert further away that the beavers probably wouldn't clog. So this here is well designed. Most of this water you're seeing here is flowing through the hill. Got that big screen there. You tell there was an ice dam. And look at that, the beavers dammed up all that, and that's why there's trees growing. That's been like that a really long time. Let's see what we have right below us. You see the debris building up on top of that grate? Now look behind it. That's a really big pipe. I just broke all the branches out of the way, making myself a trail. Now I'm going to go under there and unclog that grate there. Okay, that was actually pretty fun doing that one. That drained really fast when I got that off. Actually, we are gonna walk on the other side because I just discovered how the system works when I looked in there. It goes like a few feet to a junction where all the storm drains are, then it goes into the really big pipe. Because that right there is only a 2-foot pipe. The other side's a 4-foot pipe. Let's go inside there and see the junction. I'm gonna wash my gloves off. This is the kind of water that would have leeches if this was summertime, but leeches go into hibernation when the temperature goes below 40 Fahrenheit. Now right here in the ground, there's a junction. Under the road, there's a 4-foot pipe, and there's a pipe underneath here that collects the water. I want to see the junction underground here. Now this here is a dam they put up so the beavers could still have their pond. The beavers didn't like the water being that low, so they dammed it up a long time ago. Obviously nobody cared because you see all the trees growing. And the reason I say nobody cares is because the culverts in this area are taken care of excellently. They check them every 6 months in this area. It's not like some other states that never check them unless there's an issue. Let's go back over this side. I'm gonna take off all my gear. Okay, let's go back on the other side. I'm gonna watch where I step here. As you see, it's unstable ice. See the waterfall down there? Oh, rock spiders! There's a lot of spiders in here. You see the waterfall now, right? There's a junction up there. We got the storm drain going into the waterfall. Okay. That pipe's a little tighter than I thought. That's only 3 feet. That one's kind of tight in there. So I'm not going to go in that one. Because at the end, it's going to be difficult to turn around. And there are so many spiders in that one. But you were able to see the waterfall and everything at the junction. Hope this video was interesting. Thanks for watching. Right here we have a road with a drainage ditch off to the left. There's smaller drainage ditches on the right that cross over with culvert pipes. Now the water here, when it gets down to the main road, goes all the way down here to a big pipe, along with the water from the road. And that culvert, we were gonna go check out. Water coming off the side street, that's for a storm drain that would only operate when the snow banks are blocking the edge of the road, stopping water from coming down here. All the water you're seeing up front here, that's pretty much just coming out of the woods from snow melt. I thought I'd check this area today for culverts. I found some pretty interesting things, but there was no storm drains clogged. Like culverts like this, I don't really see how it would get clogged since there's nothing around here that could jam it up with giant sticks. It's mostly just road runoff, and anything like leaves coming down here, you know, would just wash through it. But they check these a few times a year regardless. This area never has any issues like that. Now this pipe here, I'd say this is a 3-foot one. The one I just came from with the spiders is probably only 2 feet. This one has a little bit of damage starting, and that'll only get worse over the years with the road salt and stuff washing down. This is a culvert that always runs. It never stops because it's handling a small stream. Let's go in. You're always going to find spiders, no matter what time of year, because it always stays warm in here. In the area I'm in, during the winter, it freezes down about 4 feet deep into the ground. This is more than 4 feet. And that's why it doesn't freeze up. But at the end, if it's cold enough, you'll get some ice dams. And I'm slipping now on the slime in the bottom of the pipe. You see what happened here? We have a lot of rust. That's just from the ground. This area, the ground is very rich in iron. So a lot of people have a brown ring around their toilet bowl if they don't have the mineral filter for their well. But this happened because the pipe seal fell out of place. You're supposed to have a seal. And look at that guy there. That's a big spider. Is he eating something? Looks like it's eating something. Got the spider nest on the ceiling. There'll be baby spiders pretty soon. See the rubber seal? Whoa. This rubber seal right here. I went, whoa, because I didn't see that spider at first. Oh, look at them. There's a lot of them in here. That is awesome. See this on the ceiling? Those cracks. That's going to lead to failure. Probably caused by the excessive amount of road salt. Yep, this is starting to fail. This would make a pretty good slip and slide if it wasn't so nasty from the brown water. Kind of feels like riding a skateboard. I can just push myself through. Look what I just stirred up. All that nasty water. Bright orange. Hey, look, it already cleared up. It's running clean again. Let's go take a look inside this pipe. Very rusty on the end. Lots of spider webs. This is the other side of that pipe. There's like a wetland here that's draining. Also, this is used for storm water. This road here doesn't have any drains. Also no curbs, so it just flows off the road and collects in here. Most of the water you're seeing today is by snowmelt. I just threw a whole bunch of bird seed outside, and the squirrels and birds are out there picking away. I don't feed bird seed in the summertime because it attracts chipmunks